My fiancée said pick new groomsmen, yours are ugly. I replaced the bride instead. I calmly smiled, walked her out, leaving everyone stunned and showing pride, and planning can flip a wedding. I still remember the moment she said it, her tone dripping with disdain, like she was delivering the verdict of a court I hadn't even entered. Pick new groomsmen, yours are ugly, she said, leaning back in the chair, her fingers tapping against the table, as if counting down the seconds until I crumbled. I looked at her calmly, as if she had just suggested I change the color of napkins, not insult the people I'd call brothers. My groomsmen weren't just friends, they were men I'd grown up with, men who had stood by me through every scraped knee, failed exam, and heartbreak. Her eyes narrowed. If you don't, I'm uninviting them. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just smiled, quiet and deliberate. That smile wasn't about fear or hesitation. It was the calm before a storm she couldn't see coming. The room went silent. Her jaw tightened. I stood up, walked toward the mirror by the door, and adjusted my tie, my reflection calm, unshaken, untouchable. Then I spoke, slow and measured. If my groomsmen aren't acceptable, maybe you should reconsider who's walking down the aisle instead. Her face turned pale. She blinked, once, twice, trying to process what I'd just said. The power in the room shifted, almost imperceptibly, like the air itself had decided whose command it would follow. I could see her mind racing, calculating, panicking. She had imagined a fight over suits and flowers, a tiny domestic battle, not the total rewrite that now hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I took a deep breath and walked out of the room, letting my words linger, letting her feel for the first time that the wedding wasn't hers to control. By the time she found her voice, it was too late. I had already begun the work of replacing her presence with something she couldn't anticipate. The first shock was just beginning. I didn't rush. I let the day unfold like any normal wedding prep, except nothing was normal. My groomsmen, Jake, Marco, and Simon, were buzzing around, joking and adjusting ties, completely unaware of the storm brewing, just a few rooms over. I approached them quietly, a small smirk on my lips. Gentlemen, I said, there's been a slight change of plans. Their eyebrows rose, curious but trusting. They'd known me long enough to sense when I wasn't joking. I handed each a note, simple, typed precise. Meet me at the front entrance at 4:30. Formal attire. Bring confidence. They exchanged glances. Jake chuckled. Are we crashing a wedding? Something like that, I replied, my voice low. By then, she was pacing in the bridal suite, frantically texting and calling every wedding planner, assistant, and friend she could reach. Each failed attempt only fueled her panic. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt creeping into her mind. I made my way to the florist, who had been instructed to prepare an extra set of bouquets and a small, subtle arrangement for the aisle, one that would complement everything but signal that the bride she thought she was being replaced wasn't the only center of attention anymore. Everything had to look natural, elegant, perfect, because chaos isn't effective if it looks like chaos. By 3:45, my groomsmen were ready. Crisp suits, ties perfectly matched, shoes polished. They didn't ask questions. They only nodded, knowing that when I gave the signal, everything would change in one quiet, unstoppable moment. I stepped back, watching them line up. The plan was simple: walk them down first, set the stage, and let the real power shift happen. And she still had no idea. The ceremony hall gleamed under soft chandeliers, white petals scattered along the aisle. Guests were beginning to arrive, their chatter filling the air with oblivious anticipation. She hovered near the entrance, fidgeting with her veil, checking her phone every 30 seconds, eyes darting toward the back where I hadn't appeared yet. I walked in casually, surveying the room as if I were just another guest. Then I caught sight of my groomsmen waiting, each one radiating calm confidence. That's when the plan shifted from preparation to execution. I approached the officiant, leaned in, and whispered a few words. He nodded, barely suppressing a smile. Timing was everything. At exactly 4:30, I stepped forward. The hall quieted for a split second as the first notes of the processional floated through the speakers. I gestured to my groomsmen, and they began walking down the aisle, step by measured step, their presence commanding attention without a word. The whispers started immediately. Who are they? Are those? Guests craned their necks, curious, intrigued. She froze, mid-smile, realization dawning too late. The groomsmen she had insulted, the ones she called ugly, unworthy, were now the center of every gaze, their confidence undeniable, their stature impressive. She stumbled slightly, clutching her bouquet tighter. Her carefully curated image of control cracked in real time. I remained at the back calm, letting the moment stretch, savoring her discomfort without saying a word. By the time the last groomsman reached the front, she was pale, lips pressed thin. The officiant cleared his throat. The audience, fully attentive now, waited. And I stepped forward exactly on cue. The room shifted again. Eyes followed me, a subtle murmur running through the crowd. She looked at me, wide-eyed, as if seeing me for the first time that day. "Let's begin," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the hall. She had no idea what was coming next. I moved with deliberate calm, walking down the aisle alone, every step measured, every glance intentional. Guests turned their heads, whispers building like a wave, curiosity mingling with shock. The bride's grip on her bouquet tightened, her knuckles white, her perfect smile faltering. I reached the front, standing beside the officiant. My groomsmen flanked me, solid, unshakable, the embodiment of the loyalty and friendship she had scorned. The air was electric, tense, anticipatory. She didn't move. She couldn't move. I glanced at the crowd. Cameras clicked, guests craning to see the unfolding drama, some trying not to stare, others whispering frantic questions to their neighbors. She had expected admiration, control, the adoration of everyone present, but now she was invisible. Then I began speaking, slow, deliberate. "Before we proceed, there's been a change in today's ceremony." A collective murmur rippled through the hall. She gasped, small and sharp, almost inaudible over the sudden tension. I didn't flinch. I continued. "My fiancée, unfortunately, is unable to participate in the wedding as originally planned." Her face turned crimson. Mouth opening, closing, a silent scream she couldn't release. Her eyes searched mine as if willing me to stop, to apologize, to give her control back, but I didn't. I gestured to the groomsmen. They moved smoothly, forming a subtle barrier between her and the guests. The visual was simple but devastating. The men she had mocked were now the pillars of this ceremony, their presence commanding respect she couldn't claim. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet power in the moment. The audience leaned in, unaware of the full story, yet sensing the drama unfolding in real time. She fumbled with her veil, attempted to straighten her posture, but the effect was already gone, her control shattered, her authority nullified. And all it took was calm, patience, and timing. She finally found her voice, a sharp, trembling edge cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. What do you mean I can't participate?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let her panic simmer, watched her struggle to reclaim composure. Her hands shook as she clutched the bouquet, the perfectly rehearsed pose of confidence crumbling. "You mock my friends," I said finally, my tone even, almost polite. "Called them ugly, said they weren't worthy to stand by my side. Today they are. You are not." Her lips parted in disbelief. The guests exchanged awkward glances, some leaning forward to catch every word, the tension almost unbearable. I could see her mind racing, trying to process, trying to protest, but nothing came out. The control she had always demanded, the center stage perfection she believed was hers by right, was gone. I stepped closer, letting the weight of my presence settle. "If my groomsmen aren't acceptable to you, maybe it's time to reconsider who the bride should be." Her breath hitched. For a brief second, she looked human, vulnerable, stripped of the arrogance that had driven every argument for months. The guests sensed it too. A quiet, stunned hush spread across the room. I gestured subtly, and my groomsmen moved into formation, flanking me and solidifying the visual, every eye now drawn to them, to the strength and dignity she had tried to dismiss. The officiant cleared his throat, a subtle cue that the ceremony could continue. She was frozen, trapped in a moment of her own making. And I had just begun. The first whispers of awe and disbelief floated through the air. She hadn't anticipated this. She wouldn't anticipate what came next. I turned to the officiant, a quiet nod signaling it was time to continue. The music shifted, a soft, elegant melody filling the room. Guests straightened in their seats, glancing between the groomsmen and the pale, stunned bride. I began walking slowly down the aisle again, this time flanked by my groomsmen, a united front. Each step was deliberate, each movement calm, yet charged with authority. She tried to mirror my pace, to intercept, but her efforts were futile. Her veil slipped slightly, and she hastily readjusted it, the panic in her eyes betraying her composure. The guests whispered, some subtly pointing, others exchanging incredulous looks. She had envisioned admiration, applause, control. Instead, the attention shifted entirely, magnetically, toward the men she had insulted and me, standing at the forefront of this orchestrated upheaval. I paused midway, letting the moment linger. Her breathing grew shallow. Her fingers clenched around the bouquet, the perfect posture she had rehearsed for months collapsing in real time. Then I smiled, a quiet, deliberate smile, calm and unyielding. "It seems," I said, letting my voice carry, "that the wedding has changed direction." Her gasp was audible now, sharp and unsteady. A few guests turned toward her, sensing the tension, sensing the unspoken drama. I took another step forward, letting the silence amplify the truth. The woman who had tried to control me, belittle my friends, dictate every aspect of this day, had been replaced, not by anyone else, but by the force of my calm authority and careful planning. She looked at me, desperation creeping in, realizing for the first time that her reign over this day was over. And it was only the beginning. By the time I reached the front, the officiant gave me a subtle nod, a silent signal that the audience was ready. Every guest's gaze was now fixed on me, curious, confused, a mix of anticipation and shock hanging in the air. She stood rigid, a statue of disbelief, her perfect composure crumbling like fragile porcelain. I turned slightly, gesturing to the groomsmen, who stood with quiet confidence. Their presence wasn't just symbolic, it was a statement. The men she had insulted, the ones she deemed unworthy, were now pillars of this ceremony. Their smiles calm, their posture assured, they embodied the respect she had refused them. I addressed the room, my voice carrying effortlessly. "Today's ceremony will proceed, but with some modifications. My groomsmen, who she deemed unfit, will stand as planned. As for the bride..." Her eyes widened, the rest of the words left unspoken. The message hit with surgical precision. She was replaced, not by someone else, not by chaos, but by my own measured, deliberate actions. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Some whispered, others gasped softly. She looked around, realizing the whispers weren't in her favor. Every eye was now on her, seeing the cracks in the facade she had so meticulously built. I allowed the silence to stretch, savoring the moment. She tried to speak, tried to reclaim control, but the words faltered. My calm authority, the quiet power of timing, and the loyalty of my groomsmen had shifted the balance completely. And in that moment, I knew she understood. Everything had changed. The next move was subtle but decisive. I stepped closer to the center, letting the soft music envelop the hall while keeping my eyes fixed on her. Every guest was aware now. Something extraordinary was happening, something that no wedding rehearsal had ever accounted for. She tried to speak again, her voice trembling, but I cut through the tension with a quiet, deliberate phrase. "It seems the bride today must earn her place, just like everyone else." The murmurs grew louder, a mix of intrigue and disbelief. She faltered, glancing at the audience, realizing that every eye was watching her, every whisper carrying the weight of judgment. Her hands shook around the bouquet, the image of control she had cultivated for weeks now falling apart piece by piece. I gestured to my groomsmen, who formed a subtle arc behind me, their presence commanding attention without a word. They didn't need to move. Their quiet confidence spoke louder than any confrontation. Guests began leaning forward, sensing the shift in power, sensing the narrative she could no longer control. I took a measured breath, letting the tension stretch just long enough to be unbearable. She could see it now, the calm, controlled execution of my plan, the orchestration of every detail. She had mocked my friends, underestimated me, and demanded dominance over the day. Yet here she stood, powerless, watching the very people she belittled embody the strength and authority she lacked. And then I smiled, faint but unmistakable, knowing that the final act was only moments away. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope, crisp and white, almost ceremonial in appearance. I held it up slightly so the nearest guests could see, letting curiosity ripple through the crowd. She froze, sensing its significance before even realizing what it contained. "This," I said, my voice calm, deliberate, "is the officiant's confirmation for a substitution." She blinked, her eyes darting between me, the guests, and the groomsmen. Panic replaced the arrogance she had carried all day. The room shifted, the tension palpable, every whisper growing louder. She had assumed she controlled the narrative, but now it was clear. I did. The envelope contained everything: the signed documents, the updated arrangements, a carefully orchestrated plan, ensuring that her role in the ceremony was no longer guaranteed. Her lips parted, trying to argue, but no words came out. Every argument she might have made was preempted by the precision of preparation and timing. I handed the envelope to the officiant with a nod, and he opened it calmly, scanning the contents. A subtle smile crossed his face, acknowledging the elegance of the plan. The guests sensed it too, something dramatic, unprecedented, unfolding in real time. Her hands trembled around the bouquet. She looked around, realizing that the power she had believed was hers by default had been quietly, meticulously taken. And in that moment, the shift was complete. She was no longer the bride in control. The final act was ready to play out. I stepped forward, voice steady, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Since my fiancée refuses to accept my groomsmen, we'll proceed differently," I announced. "The bride will now be replaced." Gasps ran through the room. She froze, bouquet clutched like a shield, her perfect image shattered. Guests whispered frantically, some rising in shock, others unable to look away. The groomsmen flanked me, tall, confident, calm, their presence undeniable, commanding respect she had tried so hard to deny them. Then, one by one, the bridesmaids entered, not to escort her, but to flank a new woman I had selected, my choice for the bride. She stepped forward quietly, elegance and poise radiating from her every movement, eyes meeting mine with understanding and trust. The hall fell silent, the tension palpable, the narrative rewritten in real time. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her plan, her control, her arrogance, destroyed, replaced by meticulous timing, quiet power, and precise execution. I smiled faintly, calm, deliberate, savoring the moment. The guests whispered, some staring in disbelief, others awed by the audacity. The bride she thought she would be was gone. My groomsmen stood proud, the new bride radiant, and I, finally, was in complete control. She backed away, defeated, as the ceremony continued flawlessly without her. Every insult she had ever thrown at my friends, every attempt to manipulate me, had been neutralized. Justice wasn't loud or chaotic. It was patient, calculated, and utterly irreversible. The wedding went on. She didn't, and that was the last she ever had to say about it.